A storm sheltered November rain fell in sheets across the city, transforming streets into rivers and sidewalks into streams. Victoria Hayes clutched her daughter's hand tighter as they rushed toward the glowing warmth of the Sterling Cafe, their third attempt at finding shelter after the bus broke down 6 blocks away. Her umbrella had surrendered to the wind to streets back, leaving them both drenched and shivering. "Mama, my feet are cold," 4-year-old Emma whispered, her small voice barely audible above the drumming rain. Her dark curls were plastered to her pale cheeks, and those striking green eyes, so unusual and beautiful, blinked up at Victoria with complete trust. "I know, sweetheart. Just a little further." Victoria pushed open the heavy glass door, and warmth enveloped them like a blanket. The cafe was elegant, far beyond their usual haunts, with gleaming marble floors, leather booths, and the rich aroma of expensive coffee beans. Several well-dressed patrons glanced their way, and Victoria felt acutely aware of their second-hand coats, dripping puddles onto the pristine floor. She guided Emma to a small table near the back, mentally calculating the contents of her worn wallet. Maybe $8, enough for hot chocolate for Emma, and perhaps the cheapest tea for herself. Rent was due in 5 days, and her tips from the diner had been disappointing this week. The man from her passed at the counter. Victoria ordered carefully, her fingers trembling slightly as she counted out damp bills. Emma sat swinging her legs, humming a tune Victoria had taught her, completely unaware of her mother's constant worrying about money, about safety, about everything. That's when the atmosphere in the cafe shifted. Conversations dimmed. The background music seemed to fade. Victoria felt the change before she understood it, a prickling awareness that made her spine straighten and her breath catch. A voice spoke near the entrance, deep and commanding, with an edge of authority that needed no volume to be heard. "Table for one, please, and keep the change." Victoria's hands froze on the counter. She knew that voice, had spent 4 years trying to forget it, trying to convince herself she'd made the right choice in leaving. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she forced herself to turn slowly, praying she was wrong. She was and single quotes did. Nathaniel Cross stood near the entrance, rain droplets clinging to his charcoal overcoat, which probably cost more than 3 months of her rent. Nathaniel Cross looked exactly as she remembered, perhaps more striking with the passage of time. His dark hair was slightly longer, swept back from a face that could have been carved from stone. Sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw, and those eyes, those piercing green eyes that had once looked at her with such intensity she'd felt branded by his gaze. But it was the way he carried himself that truly marked him as different from everyone else in the cafe. Confidence radiated from him, heat from a fire. He moved through the world as if he owned it, which, in many ways, he did. Nathaniel Cross owned half the commercial real estate in the city, ran ventures both legitimate and questionable, and commanded loyalty through a mixture of fear and respect. Victoria had loved him once, had been consumed by him, and then she'd run, carrying the secret that now sat at a table 20 feet away, humming and waiting for hot chocolate. The recognition their eyes met across the cafe, and Victoria watched the recognition hit him, a physical blow. His expression, usually so controlled, flickered through surprise, confusion, and something that looked almost like pain before settling back into careful neutrality. He'd been reaching for his phone, but his hand stopped mid-motion. Someone beside him, a man in a dark suit who was clearly security, said something, but Nathaniel raised a single finger without looking away from Victoria. The dismissal was absolute. The air between them felt electric, charged with 4 years of silence and unanswered questions. Victoria's survival instinct screamed at her to grab Emma and run, but her feet felt rooted to the floor. Besides, where would they go? Back into the storm, and how long could she really keep running? She broke eye contact first, turning back to collect their order with shaking hands. Maybe he wouldn't approach. Maybe he'd simply acknowledge her existence and leave, returning to his world while she returned to hers. "Maybe. The approach here you are," the barista said kindly, setting down a mug topped with whipped cream and a simple tea. Victoria managed a smile and carried the drinks back to their table, where Emma's face lit up at the sight of the whipped cream mountain. "Thank you, Mama. It's so pretty. Blow on it first, sweetheart. It's very hot." Victoria helped Emma wrap her small hands around the warm mug, trying to focus on her daughter's joy rather than the man she could feel watching them from across the cafe. But pretending was useless. She could feel his gaze like a touch, heavy and inescapable. When she finally risked a glance toward the entrance, he was gone from his spot. Relief flooded through her for exactly 3 seconds before a shadow fell across their table. Victoria. Her name in his voice sent shivers down her spine that had nothing to do with her damp clothes. She looked up slowly, meeting those green eyes that mirrored her daughter's so perfectly. It was almost painful. "Nathaniel," she managed, her voice steadier than she felt. His gaze moved from her face to Emma, who had paused in her careful sipping to look curiously at the tall stranger standing beside their table. Victoria watched Nathaniel's entire body go still as he truly looked at her daughter for the first time. Emma stared back with those unmistakable green eyes, the same unusual shade that had been passed down through Nathaniel's family for generations, the same eyes that made it impossible for Victoria to ever truly forget whose daughter Emma was. She watched the realization dawn on his face, the calculation, the sudden sharp intake of breath, the way his hands clenched and then deliberately relaxed at his sides. When Nathaniel spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of an earthquake. "How old is she?" And Victoria knew, in that moment, that her 4 years of freedom had just come to an end. The confrontation Vicky's throat felt tight, her voice trapped somewhere between truth and protective lies. "That's none of your business, Nathaniel." His jaw tightened, and she saw the flash of anger in his eyes before he controlled it. Years ago, that control had both attracted and frightened her. Now, it simply reminded her of why she'd left. "How old is she?" he repeated, each word precise and deliberate. The question wasn't really a question at all. It was a demand wrapped in silk. Before Victoria could answer, Emma looked up from her hot chocolate, whipped cream dotting her upper lip. "I'm 4, she announced proudly, holding up 4 small fingers. "My birthday was last month. We had cupcakes." The color drained from Nathaniel's face. Victoria watched him do the math, watched him count backward, watched the realization settle over him a heavy cloak. 4 years and 9 months since she'd disappeared in the middle of the night. The timeline was damning. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low and controlled, but Victoria could hear the tremor beneath it. "Privately, there's nothing to discuss." Victoria stood, positioning herself between Nathaniel and Emma. "We were just leaving. Sit down." "Victoria." The command in his tone made several nearby patrons glance their way. "Or I will make a scene that will terrify your daughter. Your choice." A fragile negotiation. Victoria's hands trembled as she slowly sank back into her chair. Emma, sensing the tension even if she didn't understand it, reached for her mother's hand. Nathaniel pulled out the empty chair and sat without invitation, his movements fluid, despite the obvious tension in his body. Up close, Victoria could see the fine lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before, the slight silver at his temples. He'd aged, though it only made him more striking. "What's your name?" Nathaniel asked Emma, his voice softening in a way Victoria had rarely heard. Emma looked to Victoria for permission, and after a moment's hesitation, Victoria nodded. Double quotes Emma. Emma Rose Hayes. Her daughter's voice was small but clear. "Hayes," Nathaniel repeated, and Victoria saw the flash of pain, not cross. She'd given their daughter her own last name, erasing him completely. "That's a beautiful name, Emma." Emma smiled shyly, then returned to her hot chocolate, the adult tension washing over her without comprehension. Nathaniel leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper meant only for Victoria's ears. 4 years. You were pregnant when you left, yes, and you never thought to tell me. I thought about it every single day, Victoria admitted, her own voice barely audible. And every single day, I chose her safety over your right to know. His hands gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white. Her safety, From me. From her own father. From your world. Victoria's eyes met his, and she let him see the fear she'd lived with. From the violence, the danger, the constant threat. From growing up surrounded by bodyguards and bulletproof cars, and knowing that people want to hurt your family because of who you are and what you do. The pain of truth. Nathaniel's expression shifted, something raw and vulnerable breaking through his usual control. So you decided I wasn't worthy of being her father. I decided she was worthy of a normal childhood. Victoria's voice cracked. I decided that maybe, just maybe, she could grow up without fear, without looking over her shoulder, without wondering if today would be the day something terrible happened. You had no right to make that choice alone. I had every right. I was the one carrying her. I was the one who would have had to watch her grow up in that gilded prison you called a home. Emma looked up at the sharpness in Victoria's tone, her green eyes wide. Mama, are you sad? Victoria forced a smile, smoothing her daughter's damp curls. No, baby. Everything's fine. Finish your chocolate. Nathaniel watched the interaction, and Victoria saw something shift in his expression. Wonder, perhaps, or longing. He was seeing himself in Emma's features, in her mannerisms, in the stubborn set of her small jaw. I've missed 4 years, he said quietly, and the anguish in his voice was genuine. 4 years of her life. First steps, first words, first everything. I know, Victoria whispered, and I'm sorry for that, truly, but I don't regret keeping her safe. Safe. He laughed bitterly. You think you've kept her safe? Look at you, Victoria. Your coat has holes in it. You're thin. You were counting change to buy her one hot chocolate. Is this safety? Is this the better life you chose? The words stung because they were true. Victoria had struggled every single day, had worked multiple jobs, gone without meals, worn shoes until they fell apart, all to keep Emma fed and housed and warm. There had been nights when she'd cried from exhaustion and fear, wondering if she'd made the right choice. An impossible decision. At least she's been free, Victoria said, her voice stronger now. At least she's been able to laugh without hearing gunshots, play without armed guards watching, live without constant fear. And what happens when you can't make rent? Nathaniel's eyes bored into hers. What happens when you get sick and can't work? What happens when your car breaks down and you can't afford to fix it? You think that's not fear, Victoria? You think struggling to survive isn't its own kind of danger? Victoria had no answer because he was right. Every month was a balancing act on a razor's edge. One emergency, one unexpected expense, one stroke of bad luck could send them into a spiral they might not recover from. I want to be her father, Nathaniel said, and the raw honesty in his voice made Victoria's chest ache. I want to know her. I want to provide for her. I want to give her everything she deserves. And what about what I want? What do you want, Victoria? To keep struggling, to keep running, to keep pretending that I don't exist. He leaned closer. Because I exist. I'm her father, whether it's written on her birth certificate or not. And now that I know she exists, I will not walk away. The threat was implicit but clear. Nathaniel Cross had resources, power, and connections. If he wanted custody of Emma, he could make it happen. He could bury Victoria in legal fees she couldn't afford, could paint her as unfit, could take Emma away legally if he chose to. What do you want from me? Victoria asked, desperation creeping into her voice. The propositionathan was silent for a long moment, his eyes never leaving Victoria's face. When he spoke, his voice was measured, careful. Come with me. Both of you. My apartment is 10 minutes away. It's warm, dry, and private. We can talk properly there. Emma can have a proper meal, dry clothes, and you and I can discuss this like adults. I don't think that's a good idea. It's not a request, Victoria. His tone hardened. You can come willingly, or I can make one phone call and have my lawyers file for emergency custody by this afternoon. I have DNA evidence right here. He gestured to Emma. Any judge would grant me at least temporary rights while we sort this out. Is that what you want? A legal battle? Courts deciding where she lives. When you see her, tears burned behind Victoria's eyes. You would do that. You would traumatize her like that. I would do whatever it takes not to lose another day with my daughter. The possessiveness in his voice was absolute. But I'd prefer to do this the civilized way. Come to my apartment. We'll talk. We'll figure this out. And then we'll decide, together, what's best for Emma. Victoria looked at her daughter, who had finished her hot chocolate and was now drawing patterns in the condensation on the window. So innocent, so unaware of how her entire world was about to change. 2 hours. Victoria heard herself say. We'll come for 2 hours. We'll talk. But then we leave. And you don't follow us. Nathaniel's smile was thin, without humor. We'll see. He stood, pulling out his phone and speaking quickly. James, bring the car to the front entrance. Yes. Now. He ended the call and looked down at Victoria and Emma. My car is on its way. Shall we? Victoria helped Emma into her damp coat, her hands moving automatically while her mind raced. Was she making the right choice? Was she walking voluntarily into the cage she'd spent 4 years escaping? But as they walked toward the exit, Nathaniel's hand hovering near Emma's back without quite touching her, Victoria realized she'd never really escaped at all. She'd just been living on borrowed time, and now the debt had come due. Outside, a sleek black Mercedes pulled to the curb, and a driver stepped out to open the rear door. The interior glowed with soft lighting and leather seats that probably cost more than Victoria's entire apartment. Wow, Emma breathed, her eyes wide. It's so fancy. Nathaniel smiled, and for the first time, the expression reached his eyes. Would you like to sit by the window? Emma nodded enthusiastically, and Nathaniel helped her inside with surprising gentleness. Victoria followed, and then Nathaniel slid in beside her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, expensive and familiar. Bringing back memories she tried hard to bury as the car pulled away from the curb. Victoria watched the cafe disappear behind them and wondered if she was driving towards salvation or destruction, or perhaps both at once. The sanctuary Nathaniel's apartment occupied the entire top floor of a building Victoria recognized from the skyline. One of those exclusive addresses that normal people only read about in magazines. The elevator required a key card and fingerprint scan, security measures that reminded Victoria exactly who Nathaniel Cross was and why she'd run. But Emma was entranced, pressing her nose to the mirrored walls and giggling at her reflection. Mama, look, there's 100 of me. Victoria managed a smile despite the anxiety churning in her stomach. When the elevator doors opened directly into Nathaniel's apartment, even she couldn't suppress a small gasp. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, now grey with rain. The furnishings were modern and expensive, all clean lines and rich fabrics. Original artwork hung on walls, painted in soft neutrals. It was beautiful, elegant, and utterly intimidating. Mrs. Chen, Nathaniel called, and an older woman appeared from what Victoria assumed was the kitchen. She wore a neat grey dress and had kind eyes that widened slightly when she saw Victoria and Emma. Mr. Cross, we have guests. The child needs dry clothes and something warm to eat. Something appropriate for a 4-year-old. And find something for her mother as well, of course. Mrs. Chen's gaze lingered on Emma with barely concealed curiosity before she hurried away. I don't need. Victoria started, but Nathaniel cut her off. You'll soak through. Emma is shivering. This isn't negotiable. Father and daughter Nathaniel crouched down to Emma's level, and the gesture was unexpectedly gentle. Would you like to see something special while Mrs. Chen gets you warm clothes? Emma looked to Victoria, uncertain. After a moment, Victoria nodded. What choice did she have? He led them through the apartment to a room Victoria hadn't expected, a study lined with bookshelves from floor to ceiling. But in one corner sat an elaborate dollhouse, easily 4 feet tall, with intricate Victorian details and tiny furniture visible through the windows. My mother's, Nathaniel said quietly. She made it when she was young. I thought ... He trailed off, shaking his head. You can play with it if you'd like. Really. Emma's eyes were huge. "Can I, Mama?" "Yes, baby. But be very gentle." Emma didn't need to be told twice. Within seconds, she was kneeling before the dollhouse, carefully opening the miniature doors and examining each room with intense focus. Nathaniel stood, and suddenly Victoria was acutely aware they were alone, or as alone as they could be with Mrs. Chen somewhere nearby and Emma absorbed in her play. "My office, now." His voice was low, commanding, and Victoria followed because refusing felt pointless. Honest Conversationless office was masculine and spare, dark wood and leather, with a massive desk that looked like it had witnessed countless important decisions. He closed the door and leaned against it, just staring at her. "Say something," Victoria finally whispered. "What would you like me to say?" His voice was dangerously soft. "That I understand. That I forgive you for stealing 4 years of my daughter's life. You don't know what it was like. Then tell me." The words came out harsh, louder than he'd probably intended. He noticed her flinch, and something in his expression shifted, became more controlled. "Tell me why you disappeared. Why you let me believe you were dead somewhere while you were pregnant with my child." Victoria took a breath, gathering courage. "Because I was suffocating. Every day in your world felt like drowning. I couldn't go anywhere without security. Couldn't make friends without background checks. Couldn't breathe without someone watching, reporting back to you. I felt like I was disappearing, becoming just an extension of you other than my own person. I was protecting you. You were controlling me." Victoria's own frustration rose. "And when I found out I was pregnant, I realized I had a choice. I could stay and watch my daughter grow up in that same golden cage, or I could run, give her a chance at normalcy, at freedom, at a life where she wasn't defined by your name and your world." Nathaniel moved to the window, hands clasped behind his back. "And has it been worth it? The poverty, the struggle, the constant worrying." "She's been happy," Victoria said quietly. "She's been safe. She's been free. Yes, we've struggled. Yes, it's been hard. But she's gotten to just be a child, Nathaniel, just a normal little girl without the weight of your world on her shoulders." A changed man, he turned to face her, and Victoria was startled to see genuine vulnerability in his expression. "I've changed, Victoria. Losing you, it forced me to look at myself, at what I'd become. I was so focused on protection, on control, that I forgot about partnership, about trust. People don't change that much, don't they?" He crossed to her slowly. "I spent 4 years searching for you. 4 years examining every decision I made, every way I failed you. I built an empire on control, but I lost the one thing that mattered most because I couldn't let go of it." Victoria wanted to believe him, but fear held her back. "What do you want, Nathaniel? Really?" "I want to be her father. I want to know her. I want to give her everything I've missed." His voice roughened with emotion. "I want to watch her grow up. I want to be there for scraped knees and bad dreams and first days of school. I want all the things you took from me, and me." His eyes met hers, intense and honest. "I want you too. I never stopped wanting you. But I understand if that's not possible. Right now, I just want a chance to be Emma's father." The agreement is. Chen knocked softly. "Mr. Cross, I have clothes for the little one, and lunch is ready." "Thank you, Mrs. Chen." Nathaniel stepped back, giving Victoria space. "Let's have lunch, all of us together, and then we can discuss arrangements over lunch." Warm soup and fresh bread that tasted like heaven after years of budget meals. Victoria watched Nathaniel interact with Emma. He was gentle, patient, asking her about her favorite colors, her favorite stories, what she liked to do. Emma answered with the easy openness of childhood, completely unaware of the complexity of adult emotions swirling around her dot, and Victoria saw something that broke her heart and healed it simultaneously. She saw Nathaniel fall in love with his daughter, saw the wonder in his eyes when Emma laughed, saw the tenderness in his expression when she told him about her stuffed rabbit at home, saw the fierce protectiveness that flashed across his face when Emma mentioned being scared of thunderstorms after lunch. While Emma returned to the dollhouse with Mrs. Chen watching over her, Victoria and Nathaniel sat in the living room, the city sprawling below them. "I have a proposal," Nathaniel said carefully. "I want to be part of Emma's life. Regular visitation, financial support, not as a payment, but as her right. Her father's responsibility. I want her to know me, to know where she comes from. And if I say no, then I'll take you to court. And Victoria, you know I'll win. I have resources you can't match." He leaned forward. "But I don't want it to come to that. I don't want to hurt Emma or you. I just want to be her father." Victoria's hands trembled in her lap. "I need guarantees. I need to know she won't be exposed to danger, to violence, to the darker parts of your world. You have my word. I'll keep that part of my life completely separate from her. She be protected, but not imprisoned. She have security, but also freedom." His voice softened. "I learned from my mistakes with you, Victoria. I won't make them again with her. I want it in writing. Legal agreements about her safety, her upbringing, her boundaries. Done. My lawyers will draw up whatever you need." He paused. "There's one more thing. I'd like you both to stay here, at least for a while, until we establish a routine, until Emma gets comfortable with me. Nathaniel, separate rooms. No pressure, just proximity so I can get to know my daughter." His eyes pleaded with her. "Please, Victoria, I've missed 4 years. Don't make me miss any more." Fragile hope of Victoria looked toward the study, where Emma's laughter drifted out, light and carefree. She thought about her tiny apartment, with its leaking roof and temperamental heating. Thought about the constant worrying about money, about safety, about whether she was giving Emma enough. And she thought about Nathaniel's face when he looked at their daughter. The raw love, the desperate need to connect, the genuine remorse for past mistakes. 1 month, she heard herself say. "We'll stay for 1 month on a trial basis. But if I see any sign that this isn't working, that Emma is unhappy or unsafe or being exposed to things she shouldn't see, we leave. No arguments, no legal battles." Agreed. Relief flooded Nathaniel's features. Agreed. They shook hands, formal and strange, sealing an agreement that would change all their lives. Telling Emma that evening, after Emma had been bathed and dressed in new pajamas that Mrs. Chen had somehow procured, the three of them sat together in the study. Emma cuddled between them, sleepy and content after a day of adventure. "Emma," Victoria said gently, "we need to tell you something important." Emma looked up, her green eyes so like her father's. "What, Mama?" Victoria glanced at Nathaniel, who nodded encouragement. "You know how some children have a daddy who lives with them, like my friend Sophie." "Yes, like Sophie. Well, you have a daddy too." Emma's eyes widened. "I do. Where is he?" Nathaniel's voice was thick with emotion. "I'm right here, sweetheart. I'm your daddy." Emma looked between them, processing. Then, with the simple acceptance of childhood, she smiled. "Okay. Can you read me a story, Daddy?" Nathaniel's eyes filled with tears. "I would love nothing more." As Victoria watched Nathaniel read to their daughter, his deep voice gentle and Emma's head resting trustingly against his shoulder, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope, fragile, uncertain hope that maybe, just maybe, they could make this work. The rain had stopped, and the city lights twinkled like earthbound stars. Inside Nathaniel's apartment, 3 people who had been separate were learning to become a family. It wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges, disagreements, moments of doubt. But as Emma's eyes drifted closed and Nathaniel's hand found Victoria's, squeezing gently, Victoria allowed herself to believe that sometimes running away leads you right back to where you belong, not to captivity, but to connection, not to control, but to compromise, not to the past, but to a future they could build together, one day, one story, one moment of trust at a time.